Bob's presentations in the past. Tonight, he's going to be talking about attracting birds with water. And just a little background on Bob, if you don't know him, he is a national award-winning nature photographer. He actually, as a high school kid, went to nature camp for 3 years. So we sponsor scholarships to nature camp. It's great to see how that sticks with people in various ways. He went to Virginia Tech, where he studied art and design. And after college, he lived in Bedford County and then Richmond, and got interested in digital camera technology and bird photography. So he's had his photographs appear in many magazines, Virginia Wildlife Magazine and calendar covers. He's received national awards, and he's regularly exhibited at art festivals throughout the Mid-Atlantic. If you want to see more of his work, there's some fabulous items that he has produced with his photography on his website. So we are eager to have you here tonight and learn about attracting birds with water. Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Victoria. All right. So, screen share. All right, you should be able to see the title screen there. Like I said, I did take a minute this morning to throw a couple of new images in here, as well as the video segment that was just featured in the Audubon. So we'll get to that later. I actually did this program quite some time back at your group, and even if you were there then, it has been nearly 100% updated. All the bird images are new. The system that I used then, I still use to this day, and it just continues to amaze me, the different birds that come to it, and with just the most simple addition of water to a backyard environment. So this is the first little bird bath I built back in Bedford County with the idea of reducing the maintenance. If you see that rock there, it weighs about 350 pounds. My brother and I drug it up out of the creek bed on a chain with his Land Cruiser, and I was amazed quickly at how many birds began to come to it there closer to the mountains. I had purple finches a lot that I only get occasionally here in Richmond. But the design of it is fundamentally the same mechanically as a goldfish pond. It's a pump in a filter box, pumping water. The main difference being that I'm pumping it up onto a rock. It trips back down onto the container, back inside of it, and recirculates. So fundamentally, it's a very simple device overall. Here's some footage I found back from one of the first winter after I had built this bird bath. I was beginning to find that at certain temperatures, the water would freeze in it, and sometimes solid. This is one of the pictures I believe was in the previous version of this program, but it is what really inspired a now 15-year journey in photography of photographing birds at this particular scene. This was really that one picture that kind of began that inspiration going forward. And I was just amazed at their unique poses. You could see their behavioral things, and you know, good photographs always tell the stories, which I began to see in the different positions and things. So once I moved to Richmond, one of the first things I did was I picked a spot in the backyard to put the new bird bath in. The rock I found at my sister's cabin up in West Virginia. We brought it home. And within, you know, no time at all after being here in Richmond, almost that same exact scene that had happened so early on in Bedford so long ago happened once again, almost identically in a way, here in Richmond with that pose and the vision of the birds drinking and their behavior. So I moved to Richmond in 2008, and just so you can see going forward, there is our beautiful green state of Virginia. But as you get closer and closer to where I am on the north side of Richmond, it gets a bit less green and less green and less green. You can see I'm in suburbia up here, surrounded by 1,000 or so quarter to a third of an acre lots. Here's my house on the corner, and unfortunately, almost half the trees you see in this image have since been removed on my neighbor's properties. But I do still have the 2 large oak trees in my backyard. And just like in Bedford County, the local birds very quickly started coming to the bird bath here. You can see now there is the addition of the dripping water. This was suggested to me by a member of the Audubon here in Richmond that it would bring in more birds, and it absolutely does. As in standard bird baths, the birds need water in their environment for a multitude of reasons. We all need water to survive. We need, food, water, and shelter. And so introducing this into my backyard in an environment that had no water in it was amazing when the birds began to come to it. And it really brought in not just the birds that had come to my feeders previously, but birds that don't eat birdseed began to show up also, which is just that extra delight. Now you'll notice as the species names flash across the bottom there, you'll notice the species count going. That's what that number is there. And, birds use the water, obviously, to hydrate themselves, just like we all need to do. And as this bird is doing, they also use it for hygiene. On hot days, they can do this in order to lower their body temperatures. Because they don't sweat, they can use water to actually lower their body temperature by wetting their feathers and letting it evaporate, which is a cooling process. Some of the other mimics also in that same family with the brown thrasher, the northern mockingbird, and the gray catbird. All 3 of those birds are closely related. And other local birds like robins. These birds tend to gather together in large flocks, and especially in the cold winter months when they're not separated out in the breeding season. This was from early winter, late fall. Happened 3 or 4 days in a row. And you can really see some of the birds with the more gray head are female. The ones with the really black heads are the males. And the much deeper rust color in their bellies. There's the 2 on the right there standing together. So some of the other local birds that show up there at the bird bath too include the Carolina wren, and other very common birds like the tufted titmouse. You can see this guy looks like he's really enjoying his bath, but not all birds like their picture taken while they're taking a bath. And the Carolina chickadee. It's not real often to see multiple birds at the bird bath, but some species do that. As we saw the American robins before, the bluebirds, especially in the winter, are often together in flocks. Other birds that don't often come to the bird bath, but do occasionally, that are local common birds, the white-breasted nuthatch, other woodpecker species like the downy. This is the male here. Other woodpeckers like the northern flicker. I got to see their red-shafted cousins out in Idaho just a couple months ago. And the red-bellied woodpecker. These guys are always quite interesting because I was just really hopeful this one spring to get video of these guys because they are one of the most awkward bathing birds I've ever seen. They sort of belly flop into the water. It's almost comical compared to how the other birds bathe. They just sort of swan dive, belly flop over into the water. Doves are unique when it comes to water because they're one of the only birds that can drink water up their beak like a straw. Most all the members of the dove family can do that, including the rock pigeon. This is one of the rare few visits from that bird ever. The starlings come by from time to time. And some of our local blackbirds, like the brown-headed cowbird. And even the grackles like to get in and show off a little bit. Actually was photographing from the blind this spring at the bird bath and twice saw a grackle kill a vole in the yard, which was quite surprising. The red-winged blackbirds, and here's the female red-winged blackbird. Often surprises me because they have such a different plumage than when compared to the males. Both of our crow species come to the bird bath from time to time. Crows, along with grackles, both will wash their food in the water, much like a raccoon does. The house sparrows come by, and of course the song sparrows. And already we're up to 25 species. And these are just some of the common birds that are here year-round throughout the neighborhood. The house finch, common visitor at the feeder. And the goldfinches. This is late spring. You can see the male on the back there has still got a little molt, just like the female that just flew in. They're another bird that will use the bird bath as a flock. And so here's an example of hygiene. So this I put in here in homage to my wife, Lori, who's a bird bander. This is the only banded bird. If you look there on his right leg, he's got a band on his leg there too. Lori does banding research. She's a certified bander. The eastern towhees, ever since we put in a brush pile in the back corner of our lot, we began to have birds that utilize that. Here's the female towhee on a morning where I suspect the water was especially cold. Then as the seasons begin to roll around, fall comes in and new birds, new species begin to show up at the bird bath. This is one of those really exciting times along with the spring where you just never know what's going to show up. This is one of the very first fall migrant birds I had years back. We had a gorgeous male this spring as well. We've had magnolia warblers. You can see that white eye ring and that notching mark there on its tail. We've had Nashville warblers. And of course, if you've got Nashville, you need to have Tennessee. And I believe a total of 3 times over the years I've had orioles. They've all been, all the ones I have photographs are females. I did have a male come down one time. This past winter we had purple finches. Beautiful male. Need to update that slide there too. That's a male, not a female. There's the female. So they're quite fun to have too. I had those, they always remind me of Bedford County. I had those all the time, every winter there near the mountains. Here I get them very intermittently, but it's always a joy when they show up. Typically in both migration seasons, spring and fall, we get chipping sparrows. This one here is in his non-breeding plumage with that extra bit of stripe over his head. And one year we even had a field sparrow. This is terrible habitat when it comes to field sparrows. They would be up in out in Hanover in the county perhaps, but typically and only once ever here. Pretty much every year we get hermit thrushes. We just had a couple within the last week show up for the first time this season. And then the winter arrivals, late into the, just after the fall migration, the winter resident birds begin to come in. The dark-eyed junco, this is a beautiful male here. I always love when the white-throated sparrows come back in. They are one of the joyful birds that fill the air with their beautiful song throughout the winter when most other birds have stopped singing for the most part. And last year we actually had pine siskins from mid-October, I believe almost to the end of May, which puts them slightly over 6 months here in residence throughout the winter. We had 1 or 2 red-breasted nuthatch. We had a couple last year as well. Nearly every year, at least locally, we have yellow-bellied sapsuckers, but have only had them at the bird bath, maybe on average every other year over the last 10 years. So not a very frequent visitor to the bath, but they do use the water from time to time. And the kinglets, I've been hearing these guys in the trees. This is the ruby crown, of course, and the golden crown. The ruby crowns tend to get very excited at the water, and they begin flashing their little ruby colored cap at the incitement. 3 winters ago, I had an orange crown warbler visiting. He showed up once or twice every week for most of the winter. And then as we really, get deep into the winter birds, the ones that really stay here the entire winter, we just have 2 warbler species during the winter months. We have the yellow-rumped and the pine warblers. All the rest of them are migratory. The bluebirds come in, whether you've got 1 bluebird or 2 bluebirds, it's always nice. Of course, 3 bluebirds is even better. Or maybe 4. Or 5. So these are typically family groups that gather together. They may even all roost together in a single box. And here's a 6-pack of them here. This photograph won Best in Show at the Camera Club of Richmond's photography contest last year in their annual 2020 competition. Other birds that come in for the winter. So it's really exciting, when we occasionally get these really nice deep snows, because one of the features that was added to the bird bath, because it did tend to freeze up when it hit 20 degrees or so, was the addition of a de-icer that keeps the water from freezing. And when there's a foot of snow, it's often the only wet water that's not frozen in the entire neighborhood. And the amount of birds that come into it are just incredible. They're often lined up, waiting around perches, surrounding it, waiting their turn, one after the other. Here's the hermit thrush. This is still today one of my favorite red-bellied woodpeckers. It's the male, and the snow scenery for me is especially fun to photograph at. It's also one of the most difficult exposure challenges in all of photography, because of the whiteout from the snow tends to darken everything else in your images. So you have to be aware and control that as best you can. The siskins that were here from this past year. So after the winter finally starts to thaw a little bit, the whitethroats get this beautiful spring plumage to them. Their lores have this gorgeous yellow intensity to them, and the migration birds begin to come through. And this is probably where one of the greatest single groups in diversity begins to show up. and it has a lot to do with that dripping water. When I was first told about the dripping water by John Coe here in the Richmond Audubon Society, it didn't sound all that plausible, but I thought I'd give it a try. And so I took a milk jug and I put it on a shepherd's cane and I poked a little hole in it and let it drip into the water. And that lasted a couple of hours. But in that short period of time, I had a black-throated blue warbler drop down to my bird bath that I've never had happen before. So I added a second valve off the pump so that it would drip all the time, nonstop, and it really has made a difference in the birds. They can now hear the water from farther away, and I think moving water is typically clean water, and so when they see that and hear it both, it lets them know that it's good water for drinking. I'm not 100% sure if this is a Big Neal's or a Gray Chief. It's definitely one or the other. It tends to have a lot of rust in there. I understand the distinction. You pretty much have to have the bird in your hand with a measuring stick. But at our second ever veery this spring, here's a bird that nests on the upper elevations of the Shenandoah, 18 inches off the ground in my backyard in Richmond. The house wrens come in the spring. I typically don't see them in the bird bath, almost never, practically. Several times I've had some of the tanagers come in. This is one of 2 or 3 summer tanagers over the years. And then finally, after several times of having female scarlet tanagers, 4 years ago, this gorgeous male scarlet tanager drops down from the canopy. Absolutely gorgeous bird. Bring beautiful spring plumage on him with his jet black wing. Red so intense, the camera sensor hardly knows what to do with it. Here's one of the females that had come in previously. Notice the darkness in her wing. That's a really good way to tell the tanager females apart. Gray-crested flycatchers. My neighborhood has a lot of silver maple trees that have lots of cavities on them, and these are cavity nesting birds. I've had them a couple of years at the bird bath. So here's a bigger chunk of the video that won the award with the National Audubon Society. I've spent several days shooting still shots, of which I have some that I was very pleased with. And so on another session, when they began to show up, I went out and decided I would shoot video since I had so many still shots already. The birds without the red on their wings typically are going to be younger than 2 years old. They don't get those wing marks until they're 2. Slow this down and count how many birds actually come in and go out and come in and go out. And I shot that video laying on the ground with a blanket thrown over my head because the blind was not set up. And I had just having seen their behavior, how feverishly they wanted to get into the bird bath, I suspected they would tolerate my presence laying on the ground 15 feet away with no blind whatsoever, and my camera dropped down low on a tripod. So I was especially happy, and I actually sat and shot videos for almost 45 minutes, and that's just one of the 1 minute sections there. But every spring, the warblers begin to come in, and this is one of the most exciting times. My wife Lori and I will often put the blind up during the spring for 2 to 3 weeks at a time, about 15 feet away. We put our couple comfortable chairs in there and take our morning coffee out and watch and listen. These birds typically call in the canopy, so if you know your warbler songs, you know what's coming. And most of the time we hear these birds in advance before they come down to the bird bath. We'll see them hopping around the yard, feeding on bugs and insects as they migrate. These birds migrate at night at high altitudes. When the sun begins to come up, they look for a green spot somewhere they can stop and feed for 2 or 3 days so they can replenish their protein reserves. and then continue their next jaunt towards their breeding grounds. Many of these birds are heading to the boreal forest of Canada to breed. Birds like the blackpoll. These are one of the most common birds in the summer in the boreal forest. They're very notable by their orange legs. Here's a gorgeous male black-throated blue. And his cousin, the black-throated green. This spring we were blessed enough, I did not think to put it in. We had a gorgeous Cape May male this spring that came in for 3 or 4 days consecutively. That was just absolutely gorgeous. This is a blue-wing warbler. That day during spring migration, we had 3 blue-wing warblers in my backyard in the middle of the Richmond suburb, singing around in the bushes. That was one of the ones that came into the bird bath. And every spring, we have these beautiful breeding plumage yellow rump warblers come through. You can see he's well-named bird by his yellow rump patch there. Their little crest is quite interesting because just like the kinglets, they can open that little patch and raise it up even like a crest, almost like a cardinal or something. Birds can move every feather on their body. They're not just wearing a jacket. And it's always quite interesting when they begin to move those feathers around at will. These birds take one of the longest bird baths of any species I've ever seen. I have some video clips that go on for 3 minutes endlessly, which most birds are in there, 5 to 10 seconds is an average, duration probably. And once again, you see the dripping water here. This is a really preferred speed for the dripper to get to. You sort of counterbalance the pressure between the 2 valves that are on the water pump. And part of it pushes up a small water line that's on a shepherd's cane. The rest of it just flows out into the puddle. The Blackburnian warbler. Another bird with amazing color intensity. And then this odd bird dropped in. And I began to realize how few female warblers I've just seen in the field because they don't sing. This is actually a female Blackburnian. An absolutely gorgeous bird. Those light buffy colorings. Here's another female I've rarely ever seen just out in the field. The males in the spring are relatively, easy to find if they're there because they're singing. They sing a distinct song, so you can just follow the sound. Once again, the orange legs on this bird also make a good ID mark. But beautiful, delicate striping on this bird. Here's the yellow warbler. Nice spring male here. It's interesting how short their tails are. Common yellow throats, we typically have had every spring at least one, and this year was no exception. This was from this spring. And occasionally I will get females in the fall as well, which we also had this year. This is I believe, after a first year chestnut-sided prairie warbler. This year we did have our second ever prairie warbler. Black and white warbler. So often if we're out and the blind is set up, we'll hear these birds overhead moving around. Often it shows how people ask me, what is my favorite picture? And this is one that I'm always drawn to. It's just such a unique thing to see, a tiny little hummingbird submersed in the bath with a little drop of water on his beak was just icing on the cake. Still one of my favorite pictures. And then as spring passes, summer rolls around and the baby birds begin to show up at the bird bath. The baby blue jays, here's a young brown thrasher. Notice his eye color is that sort of greenish gray instead of the gold like the adults have. Last year we had baby bluebirds for the second time. First time I've gotten photographs of them, so I was especially excited. Young red-bellied woodpecker. So these birds show up at the bath to drink, and they instinctively seem to know they're supposed to get in the water. They're often quite puzzled by it at first as they step into it. It's quite interesting to watch. And several times I've seen what I suspect is birds taking their first bath ever. And it's always quite interesting at their awkwardness. We get other critters that show up at the bath as well. It's not just exclusive only. The other critters in the area are welcome too, like the eastern chipmunk. And the gray squirrels are out there quite often. I have two very large 100-year-old oak trees right in the back corner of my lot. So I have a herd of squirrels out there pretty regularly. At night, the possums show up. I've had these guys. This one was actually in Bedford, but I've had them here in Richmond as well, along with raccoons. And I've had those also in Richmond here since I've been here. Actually, just about an hour ago, I was watching, there was what I think was a shrew walking around at the bird bath too. Here's a groundhog. This guy showed up several years ago from time to time. I believe was a 1-year-old youngster. So that's 68 bird species without counting the mammals. Additional ones also are indigo bunting, which I did get photographs of this spring. I've had yellow-throated palm warblers, red-shouldered hawk, sharp-chin hawk, Cooper's hawk, ovenbird, wood thrush, and hooded warblers over the years as well. The indigo bunting, this year was the first time that I got photographs of them as well. Another new bird that showed up a few years ago, the brown creeper. And the very next year, the winter wren showed up. We actually had one of these just 2 weeks ago. Another new species. This is a female orchard oriole the very next year. And so far, I'm trying to keep a running record going where I've had new species every year. And last year finally was the red-eyed vireo. I'd had it come down within a couple of feet of the bird bath before, but I don't count them until they make contact with the rock. And then this year's surprise was this fox sparrow that hung out about maybe 2 weeks or so in the spring, out at the bird feeder, late winter, early spring, really handsome bird. But leave it to the Carolina wren to figure out this thing is rigged. So in this next section here, I'm going to kind of show you how this thing is built, how it kind of came together, how it's evolved into its current state. So here's the sort of updated version that you saw from earlier. It still has the pump and the rock and the water line. The addition of a de-icer was one new feature. And then number 3, the addition of the extra valve and the water line going up there to number 5 as the dripper became in. But still, I've tried to keep it as mechanically simple as I can, because the entire purpose of my desire to do this was also to keep the maintenance of the bird bath itself to an absolute minimum. And I had so many people over the years asking me about instructions. I finally printed up a booklet that has all the parts and instructions in it. And I've had people build their own. This is Lexi Meadows. She is president of the Southside Bird Club. She set some pretty cool birds, Wilson's warbler, yellow-throated warbler. This one is out on an island in the middle of Green Bay in Door County, Wisconsin. It's run off of a solar system. They get some pretty cool birds up there too, rose-breasted grosbeak and Baltimore Orioles. This one is Donna Cottingham out in Goochland. And I always have to give Donna thanks because she began to use the term, she called this her bird spa, which is what I changed the title of the instruction booklet to. And it's just such a fitting term. This is one that's in Southside Richmond. They're in a deciduous woodland habitat, so he gets deciduous birds, the hooded warbler there in the spring, along with the scarlet tanager. He gets other members of the deciduous community there too, coming by from time to time for a drink. And then in 2017, I was featured on the Virginia Homegrown Show with Peggy Singelman. She is the master, the garden manager over at Maymont, and has a TV show there too. That was quite fun and quite nervous to do, but a lot of fun. Really nice lady as well. They came out and filmed some video in the yard and things like that. But the features of this is that it's most importantly was to be low maintenance. It also is mosquito proof. It prevents algae buildup, within the system itself. It runs all year long. The filter helps keep the water clean. So, the average cost, if you have your own rocks, is about $200, a little under $200. If you got to buy rocks, just depending on where you got to get them at and what the current price is, it's a bit more. But you need the main rock for the bird bath, the rocks that go around the base of it, a plastic storage bin, that's what holds the water. The pond filter box and heater are made for goldfish ponds. Along with the pump, a couple pieces of rebar, perhaps an extension cord. The vegetable strainer gets hooked to that, and a piece of heavy gauge plastic. We'll see in just a minute what that is used for. That was also an addition just after building the first one. So here's my map of my backyard in Richmond. Our primary view there from our house is out towards our backyard. Our feeders are just about at the tip of that green arrow, just across the brick patio. We put the bird bath at a vantage point where we could view it nicely from the house, yet it was far enough out that we didn't have to worry about window collision and stuff like that. We also have cats, and we didn't want to torture them through the window because they're indoor only cats, by putting it too close to the house. But it's where we can view it quite nicely. I have an outlet on my patio that it all plugs into. So one of the first things that needs to happen is you got to find the rocks to do it. I've had great luck at some of the landscape places that sell rocks. I've learned to look in the lumpiest piles for one that has sort of a puddle area, like you need something about the size of a Frisbee or a dinner plate, and about that deep is really all you need. If you have friends that have a creek or land in the mountains, that's another great place. The rock there you see on the right is the same one in all the pictures. When it was brought back from my sister's cabin property in West Virginia, it had that nice little bowl shape to it. It also had lichens and stuff on it, which have since drowned, I guess. But we picked out the spot. We clear off the spot a little bit, just kind of making room, and digging a hole so that the container is a couple inches above ground. You don't really want the hole to be a whole lot bigger than the container. The better the fit, the better it seems to work out. But obviously it has to be a little bit bigger. Putting the lid on while you're digging is very helpful, so that you don't get dirt inside of it when you stop and measure from time to time. And it doesn't have to be perfectly level, but the more level, the better, just because it'll hold a little bit more water that way. And then lightly rake the dirt back into it. Once again, with the top on, this is where the dirt will get in it if you don't do that. The next thing is putting the hole in the top of the lid. Now you notice I've selected a box that has a concave lid. This helps the water recollect into the center. This is where the water will go back in. It also keeps out leaves, and it prevents mosquitoes from gaining access to the water, so that they can't breed in the water. So I'm just going to attach a basic vegetable strainer with 3 little nuts and bolts and a couple of washers. I made the hole about a 1/4 inch smaller than the strainer, so it has, a reasonable amount of overlap, so that it seals nicely. And the screen goes to the inside, so it forms a cup. So this way, like this time of year, when leaves fall in the bird bath, eventually some will collect down in there. It's nothing I clean out all the time, but just once in a while, I go by and pull them out from under there. Here's the filter box and the pump. I'm using a little bit bigger pump than that nowadays. The one I'm using does, I think, 325 gallons per hour movement. But there's the filter box. And I typically stick a couple of rocks in the bottom of it just to help weight it down, so that it sinks when the water goes in. Here's the heater. You can get those at Farm Supply and Amazon as well. But that allows it to be year-round use in every season, especially when it gets like sub-zero, or not sub-zero, but sub-freezing for 3 or 4 days in a row, like we seem to get once every winter. Once the box is full of water, you can pack the rest of the dirt in around it gently. Just be careful not to start caving in the sides. And so here's the valve system. So the water line that comes up from the pump, I've added a short stick of copper pipe, and I've attached 2 valves for it. The pressure valve number 2 there is just a press fitting. You just stick the pipe in and tighten it with that nut. The other one is actually a refrigerator ice maker kit line kit. They sell that with the tube and everything. And so here it is in a photograph. And then that little line runs up and becomes the dripper. You just balance the pressure of those 2 valves against each other. And once the water starts dripping, whatever pressure's left goes into the puddle. That piece of plastic I was talking about, if you look where this yellow line is, it goes in, is I overlay a piece of heavy plastic over it. This helps recapture any splashing and water from the dripping that goes on and funnels it back into the center. Once that's in place, you can set your 2 pieces of rebar on their bridges. This keeps the main center rock suspended over that. I have had people use ceramic plates and regular concrete bird baths as well, and just done everything else the same. The reason I used the rock and started with the rock is I wanted to do photography at it, so it looked somewhat natural as well. The next thing is to test which way the water is going to flow. So I take a cup of water and I pour it in the puddle. I like to have the waterfall pouring to the front and onto the ground. And then the extra plastic just gets rolled up around the edges, making sure it's slightly elevated to keep that water funneling down into back into the container. And then that gets covered with rocks around the base of it. And so there you have it. Pretty simple, straightforward design is overall. And this one has been running for, I guess, 12 years now since I've been in this house here on the north side of Richmond. Then I put landscaping around it. It's under 2 large oak trees. I do think it's good to have it in the shade. It just seems to keep the water a little better. Typically, if you have shades, you're going to have nearby perches, which are important. Also, having perches and escape routes for birds that do come out, not drawing them out into the open too far. Maintenance wise is just keep an eye, cleaning the surface from time to time, topping off the water, and occasionally adjusting the valves. The dripper tends to wane off when the water level gets low. So usually if it stops dripping, the first thing I do is if you just listen to it, you can hear, because it sounds like a hollow drum when the water gets low. This is one of my favorite toys. This is a home security camera that I keep about 18 inches away from the bird bath. It comes to a feed in my office. The birds don't seem to care that it's out there because it's an inanimate object. They've gotten used to it being there. I don't know that it ever took much getting used to, because it doesn't seem to bother them. The feed from that is wireless. It comes in through that little receiver box you see up there on the screen. This is in my home office stuff. I just took this with my cell phone one morning. It was especially busy out there. The bluebirds were coming in. Cedar waxwings coming in. And I believe that's a little bit of ice down there in the bottom corner. So I think this was like January when this video was taken. So I shoot Canon equipment. I'm shooting a 5D Mark III body. Nearly all of these pictures were taken with the 400mm prime lens, the f/5.6, on a tripod. I do use a shutter release, a hardwire shutter release. So I am triggering my camera live when I see the birds, often watching them from the security camera. In the spring, we do set the blind up, and Lori and I will go here on a blind date from time to time. And so you can see we're about 15 feet away. The warblers is really fun when they come in because they'll land on the perches and stuff. And it's just a great opportunity to get photographs of some of those birds that typically live in the upper tree canopy as well. So here's where approaching the end. I do want to thank you all for letting me share my passion for birds. It's groups like yours that instilled my passion as a kid. My 4th grade teacher connected me with the Lynchburg Bird Club back in the day. As I was saying earlier, I spent a great bit of the home alone time in the past 18 months building my website to the degree it should have been years ago, but they're full species gallery. So if you have a favorite bird, you can go right and see my best pictures of those. I'm also at exhibiting at art shows very regularly. I'll have done 24 shows in just a half a year since the world reopened. And I do have the instructions on how to build the bird spa are also on my website, along with the DVD that covers 45 different species. The new calendars for 2022 are out. I've got a couple of new note card sets. I think the newest one is the waterfowl set. The coloring book is also, so if you click on the store tab, you'll see all those on there. This year's Christmas cards up there as well. And if you have other groups that are in need of speakers too, please have them reach out to me. There's information on my programs on my website, along with my contact information too. And from time to time, I'll stick something up on social media. But this is in memory of our cat from a few years back, Dobbins, who sat up there as I was editing this program one evening and let me put the final touches on it there. So thank you all for having me out. I greatly appreciate the opportunity, and it's so good to see you all when it's been a odd time where we haven't seen much of anybody. So it's really good to see everybody. And I'm gonna stop my screen share here. There we go.
Well, that was just tremendous. I love that.
Thank you. Thanks, Cheryl.
There's some comments and questions in the chat box. Can you see those?
Yeah, I sure can. How do you keep predators like cats away? That's a really good question, because that's, you know, even if you just have bird feeders and stuff, that's typically a concern as well. And I do live in an area where there are a few roaming cats belonging to neighbors or not. They're out and about from time to time. And I have found that a good just run out the back door and wave my arms like a crazy banshee man, hissing and shouting, scoots them immediately out of the yard. Especially the first time, the more you can sneak up on them, the better. And they go, you know, taking off and run and jump. I've got a 3-foot fence around my property, and they spring over that. And I find, you know, after 2 or 3 times of that, they're much more weary about crossing the fence line. I do have a couple, like I said, especially the security camera at the bird bath. I can obviously see them there as well. There's another one on my shed that I can, from time to time, I'll see them roaming around. I've heard other people have suggestions, which I thought was a pretty good idea, was perhaps using a tennis ball. I've not done that myself, but at least that's something that would get the cat moving. And even if you did hit it, it wouldn't hurt it, depending on your arm strength, I guess. But even if you just hurled something nearby, would probably do the trick. So but that's what I do. I've also heard people say a squirt gun and a garden hose are also good tools to have by. So that can often help do that. But I have found after just a few chasings off my property, they do tend to stay off my property too. Let's see, there's another question here. Going to set up a trail camera in my in-ground bath tomorrow. Yeah, I had a lady who her husband gave her my instruction book and built the bird bath for her for Christmas. And they went away, I think, to Florida or something for 2 weeks. And she didn't want to miss what was coming. So they bought a trail cam and they actually ended up putting it a little too close because the camera couldn't focus. But she downloaded the camera when they got back for the first time, and she actually had a fox sparrow in there. Unfortunately, it was a blurry picture because it was too close to the trail cam, couldn't focus that close, but it did show her, the things that had come on her 2-week vacation. So check to see what the minimum focus distance of your trail cam is if you're going to do that. But that's a great idea, and just get that beam pointed, where it will shoot, pick up movement over the puddle. Another question is, from what power source do you vary a line from the house? So you need a ground fault interrupter circuit to do this. The one I happen to have one on the corner of my patio. It is one that is made so that if it gets a short in it, it will cut off the power. Occasionally, and it seems to be in the fall. I don't know if it's the young squirrels, but the squirrels seem to start testing stuff with their teeth. And they tested my plastic Adirondack chairs, and I've had them test my power cables that are extension cords going to the bird bath as well. And so that's a very important thing to make sure it's ground fault interrupter. I've had people, bring in electricians to trench a line over to where they want to put it. But you do need an outdoor rated box, preferably one with a cover, so that once you plug in the heater and the pump to it, you can cut, it closes with a cover to protect it from the weather. Let's see here. Cindy, thanks for your kind words, Cindy. What security cameras require Wi-Fi? So I'm using a camera that is actually it actually uses an older technology, really, that used to be for your home cordless phone. It's a 2.8 gigahertz frequency. So it has about 100-foot range, which is about to the end of my property from my office where I'm sitting now. And so it covers, the one I'm using is made by Uniden, so it's completely wireless. And you can run, on the one I'm using, it runs 4 cameras. I like to run just one camera, especially if I'm shooting remotely, because if you just use one camera, you get audio. And there's nothing better than being in my home office and having the sound of the birds from the backyard brought in through the microphone on it. When you run all 4 cameras, you don't get audio with 4 of them, but when just running the one camera. So I'm running a Uniden system. I've looked at some of the Wi-Fi cameras and things like that, and there's just an insane array of options in that. A lot of difficulty in the early technologies of the Wi-Fi cameras was a lot of them were not Macintosh compatible, and I'm an Apple's guy, coming up through graphic design business and stuff. So there was a lot of struggles with viewers that you could use on your computer to view them with. I think a lot of that has overcome in the years, as far as I know. A lot of the wireless ones also circumvent those problems, but that's my experience was to make sure it's compatible with your computer if you're going to use a on computer browser for that. And let's see here, amazing number of species that have been. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and it continues to amaze me. I have every hope I'll get species, whatever I'm up to, 83 or 4, I guess, this year, hopefully, before things end. We still got 6 weeks left. So, or actually for next year, I did get the fox sparrow this year. Some people have heated bird bass. Is that not practical for your setup? So there's no need to heat the bird bath, except mine is kind of heated, but it's actually the device I'm using is called a de-icer.
Yeah.
And it only runs when hits freezing. So a heater actually would warm to a certain temperature. This one just only runs to keep it from freezing. So basically its whole purpose, this device is used by farmers in their cattle troughs. So that when the cows are out in the field in January, they would struggle with thirst without those, because the bathtub or whatever they're putting water in for the cows or horses would freeze. So they typically are used for that purpose. And there's several different ones on the market. The one I've also used is made for goldfish ponds. It's for this, it does the same thing. It only runs when it gets right at freezing enough to keep it from freezing.
At first I thought a de-icer was some kind of chemical you added. And so I was thinking, what is that? And then also, I guess if the water is cold, like obviously it's below freezing, but it's running, but.
Right. But
doesn't affect them, their feathers are turning to ice or whatever. Well, I guess it would in nature anyway.
Yeah, the main puddle does seem to run even well below that for quite a ways. The drip line, it does freeze from time to time, and it typically just thaws out, and you might have to adjust the valves to get it dripping again, but it is not split the pipe or anything because it's not pressurized either. So there's expansion room for it within the pipe itself. This fall, I had squirrels chew on my dripper line. I went over one day and the puddle was completely dry, which it like almost has never been. And so I filled it up, and it of course started pumping, and water's just squirting all over the, out onto the, away from the bird bath where the squirrels chewed the line. And I've still got to fix the dripper line. I've got it where it's just running into the puddle only as well. So let's see here. Does the pump water bucket have to be under the rock? It seems that would be very difficult to clean out. So the purpose of this is that you don't have to clean it out. The filter box actually sort of grows a bacteria in it, just like a probiotic in your stomach, that processes any organic matter that flows into the water. And so the filter box itself is sort of made to not be disturbed. I have only been into my bird bath for maintenance reasons, maybe in 10 years, maybe 6 times total. And typically that's because, a pump lasts anywhere from 2 to 5 years. I think I'm on my 3rd pump in a decade. The heating things, I'm on my 3rd one in about a decade as well. And so typically that's the only reason I'm going in there, is for part replacement. As far as cleaning wise, it is made not to go into at all. All you do is when the water gets low, I take the garden hose over and I turn it on and I drop it down in there until I see it overflow a little bit. And if it's winter time and I'm filling it, I get too lazy to want to hook up the hose. Then you got to fill it up. Then you got to drain the hose, in the cold, and the hose is hard to get going in the cold too. So typically I will use a 5-gallon bucket at that point. But
well, I guess my question would be, for me,
yes,
if I have somebody else place the rock, I may never be able to lift it.
Yeah,
So
so
that means
that's a
I
good
can't,
question.
yeah.
I understand
can't
exactly,
replace
yes.
the pump.
Right, so the rock, you notice the original rock I used was like 6 inches thick and like this big around, it was 350 pounds. The one I have here is like 60 pounds. It is way, way lighter.
Yeah, but see, I still couldn't lift 60 pounds. So I'm
Yeah,
wondering
you
if
may have
there's-
to have someone, come and help move it over or something. Another option, exactly for that, which is what I've had people do, is they use a nice ceramic plate like the bottom or terracotta that you would put under a big house plant, instead of a rock. Ceramic plate, same kind of thing. The water only needs to be about 1 inch deep at the most. Most bird baths I see are too deep for the warblers and the little birds and stuff like that. Most of them, the first thing you do when you get a concrete bird bath at the hardware store is put a rock in it so that it's not too deep, because they're like 3 inches deep, which is way, way too deep. Most of those warblers were drowned in 3 inches of water. I mean, it's over their head. So you really just need mine is probably, if I put a measuring stick in it, at the deepest one little point of the bowl, it might be 7/8. I don't know if it's a full inch deep, but it's right around there. So you don't need a big, huge puddle. I mean, my puddles is about this big. It's about the size of a Frisbee in the same depth and not much bigger than that. So you don't need a huge thing, a huge rock on there. I'm using a rock because, like I said, I want to do photography at it. I want to kind of have it look like a little creek or whatever that doesn't come or go anywhere, but it has that look to it. But that's a very good question though, because that definitely is a concern. So you don't feel like you have to use, a rock particularly, just anything that will give you that right size puddle. And there are a lot of, even I think the wild bird stores have some stuff they sell too that are the right size for that kind of thing. The main thing of it being over the water though is that the water drips back into the system and is recirculated.
How would you get it to drip out if you used clay?
Well, the box is probably 2 feet across and 18 inches wide. And as long as the plate is smaller than that, it would have to. And the skirt, that plastic skirting, also same thing, anything that gets splashed out, that helps recollect it. Because the first one I built, I was surprised, like 5 days of water was gone. And I'm like, well, this isn't very low maintenance. And so I added that skirt to it, and it's made all the difference in the world. So it really is, it doesn't seem that important, but it really makes a huge difference in how much water it collects, especially you see like the brown thrashers. I mean, they're flinging water, at a pint a minute, the way they splash around, and it really helps recollect a lot of that. So it's really not that hard. You can always tilt something just a little bit front to back on how you have it suspended. I've often thought you could use like they make those pot holders to hold flower pots on your patio with 3 legs on them. Just take one of those and let the legs poke through the top, and have it suspended on one of those. Would even elevate it a little bit as well. So.
And then did you cover the plastic with rocks?
Yeah, so I put the rocks around, are really just a decorative cover of all the, Wizard of Oz mechanics around the bottom. Too, it's mostly just for looks. It does help keep leaves in the fall from getting under there. Is really, it's just for looks and for a little shelter protection from the stuff underneath. But it's, like I said, even that's not necessarily, you could even do a wire mesh or something and do river pebbles, as long as the water can get back into the system to recirculate.
Thank you.
Sure. Let's see, water wigglers. Yeah, I've seen those. So the dripping is the kind of the same principle as water wigglers. If you're familiar with those, it's the water movement and sound in combination that for some reason is just magnetic, especially to the spring warblers. I mean, it is just incredible that I can set up a blind in my backyard in the middle of the suburbs of Richmond and, and photograph, like this spring we had the Cape May warbler was just incredible. And all the other ones you saw, too over the years, and the tanagers and the orioles coming is quite interesting. Does your camera have an app too? My camera will run off a remote application that Canon makes for it. But I have found even the wireless remotes for remote triggering are too slow. I'm shooting, hopefully around at least not much less than 1/200th of a second or faster. And the lag time on a wireless thing is like maybe even as much as a second or 2 seconds. And so when I'm shooting 200th of a second, 2 seconds is like 2,000 times past, of what I was hoping for. And so I have found in my purpose that a hardwired, I literally have 3 30-foot extension cables tethered together from my office to the backyard. When I shoot remotely, I can view the footage from the video camera and shoot almost live time. But even some of the security cameras, I bought a new security system, cameras that were wireless, they were new and HD and everything, but they had just the worst lag time. I just was astounded. I'm like, oh my God, that's like, I got to take these things back because they're just way too slow for what I'm used to. So this system that I use from Uniden is not the most high resolution. It gets, I can tell what it is. That's all I really need. But it's quick. And that to me, I found to be the most important component for what I do with it. If it doesn't matter, if you're not doing photography and you had a camera there, the 2-second lag time may not be a deal breaker at all. But for me, it was, I was rather alarmed when I tried my new camera system and realized I would wave my hand like this. I'd go, and over there on the camera, it would go, a second or so later. I'm like, oh, that's not good. Let's see here. I see hardware bankrupt, camera went bankrupt, and the app is no longer updated. So we start over. I'm not sure who was that. Icebreaker. Mary Jo, are you still here? Where's Mary Jo at?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, there you are. Hey.
I was saying that I'm not a photographer. I just like to watch what's happening at my bird bath, but we had cameras installed at our house, and I was just trying to make people aware that just do your due diligence, because we bought our cameras at Costco, and 2 years after we spent all this time to install our hardwire cameras, the app that went with the cameras was no longer updated because the company went bankrupt. And now, we can still see what's going on outside if we're in our house looking at, our computer screen, but when we're away from the house, we want to see what's going on.
Right. You don't get the alerts anymore.
Yeah, we don't get anything. We can't see anything. So if somebody is like me and doesn't have like a camera and they're not into photography, but they still want to see what's going around at their bird bath or whatever, just to be cognizant that this problem is a
that's a good point.
And it happens a lot more than it happens a lot more than I knew when it happened to us. So
yeah, that may be the same ones I looked at, because the ones I looked at and took back were from Costco. So and stuff too. The other fun thing I will do though with my cameras, I don't have where it alerts me on my phone, but that may be the same system that you have that I was looking at. But when I'm at home here, I will take one, like if the bluebirds are nesting in the backyard, I'll take one of the cameras and move it over there to the bird box. And not also do I get to see them coming in and feeding and stuff, but I also know that there's nothing sneaky, sneaking up the pole to get the babies too.
Right.
So it's kind of becomes their security, but I also get to enjoy, stuff that's right there in my backyard too. So I do use them for their unintended purpose.
Yeah, me too. My husband, not so much, but it's like, zoom in on the birdhouses. I'm happy.
Yeah, I feel you, girl. That's me too. Yeah, I've been very blessed. I mean, the fact that I'm in the environment I am and we have bluebirds nesting is incredible too. But you know, the other one, there's one that has a permanent mount at the bird bath as well too. When we had actually when it snows, we will take one of the cameras and put a end table out on the patio, put sprinkle seed under it, and put one of the cameras right there in front of the pile of seed, and sit in our bed and have, you know, coffee in the morning, watching the birds hop around in front of the camera, you know, en masse, because they just go crazy for the seed in the snow. So,
Oh, I hate to do this, but I think
Yeah.
we need to start wrapping up.
yeah, I think we're down to the bottom anyway. So, yeah, it was the one about lifting rocks. Yeah, I think that's all. I think we got it all covered anyways, though. So thank you all for having me out, and it's good to
Thank
see
you so
everybody.
much, Bob. We
Yeah,
really
thank you.
appreciate you, and you're always willing to come out and present to us, and you have so many different wonderful programs, and we appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, Cheryl. Good to see everybody. Thank you too. Y'all have a
Thank
good
you.
evening. Have safe holidays and all that good stuff. And we'll see you out in the bushes.
Okay,
All right. Bye-bye.
okay,
Thank
let's
you.
go on then and do our business meeting portion of